They put an extremely high focus on business success. It was interesting. We were sitting around in a discussion group talking about how you measure productivity. The way they measure productivity is, get this is how they measure developer productivity. They measure developer productivity as revenue per developer. And that is what they've settled on as their best productivity measure. And, you know, at first glance, I think a lot of technical people would have an issue with that. It's like, well, what influence do I have over revenue? But from the business side, it's like, well, what else do I really care about? I don't really care how many lines of code somebody produces. I don't care that you produce the world's coolest feature. If it doesn't actually help sell software, it's not really very worthwhile to the business. And so the revenue per developer is something they've settled on. Another really interesting practice they've got is that for promotion purposes, one of the factors that's considered for promotion is the developer's portfolio of product wins. So it's not portfolio of on-time delivery or portfolio of really cool patents or cool technical solutions. It's a portfolio of product wins, meaning the product they were associated with was successful in the marketplace. And they're pretty candid about saying, we don't necessarily know what the secret sauce is that makes a product successful, but we know that if this guy has been associated with 5 successful products and this guy's been associated with 2 successful products, whatever this guy is doing is something we want to replicate. And so, you know, that's one of the factors we're going to consider. It's not the only factor, but it's one of the factors, the portfolio of product wins. And they describe themselves as a world-class seat-of-the-pants organization. It's interesting to me because I think they're highly introspective, but for the most part, they're not terribly quantitative. So they're similar to McDonnell Detweiler in that they're very self-critical, very much paying attention to what's working and so on, but you know, go a different direction in terms of trying to put hard numbers and draw statistical control charts and that kind of thing. So what conclusions can we draw from all this? Well, I'll tell you what my conclusions are, and then we can talk about it. I think the attributes of world-class software organizations include the following. 1, top talent. I think that top talent is variously defined. What Boeing wants and what Microsoft in the 90s wanted and what Google wants today are not necessarily the same thing. But I think that in any given case, whatever that company defines as top talent, they go after pretty aggressively. And then I think they provide support for top talent. The nature of that support might be different. In some cases, it might be a really cool work environment. NASA can't provide the same kind of benefits that Google can. On the other hand, it can provide the opportunity to work on a spaceship that goes to Mars, which Google really can't. And so, you know, the support for top talent can be a little bit different. I think a strong sense of mission. Each of the companies I've mentioned managed to create within its staff a strong sense of mission. You know, NASA sending a satellite to the moon or to Mars, that's a pretty cool mission. I can see getting behind that. I can see people wanting to work overtime. But you look at Microsoft, they managed to motivate someone to come to work on Christmas Day and to come back to work after going to the movies on Friday night. They weren't requiring people to do that. People were doing it because they wanted to. And so this strong sense of mission is something that I think is pretty impressive. I mean, it's easy to create it when you're talking about going to the moon. If you can create that for working on a word processor, that is really, really quite a feat. And then I think making sure that your staff is highly aligned with your mission. I think real business accountability, not just accountability in the sense of it was a technical success but a business failure, but making sure that your technical and technical management staffs understand that they are responsible along with the rest of the business for the business success of the project. Seems to be a common feature of these world-class organizations. I think a commitment to quality is something we see across the board. The level of quality you need for a word processor or a search engine is not the same as what you need for satellite control software or embedded software in a safety-critical device. So quality gets defined somewhat differently, but within that relevant context, I think the commitment to quality is an important part. Frequent introspection, learning from mistakes, as I've said, I think that is a common attribute of the better organizations as well. Another feature that I think is interesting is that standard practices, that is practices that somebody like me might write about in a book, become highly adapted to the local environment. And that is something like the UFOs at Symantec. I can't really go in and recommend to somebody you should do UFOs because it depends on a culture that says it's cool to actually get an extra feature with your name on it attached to a product. If you don't have, can you imagine an average organization where the reward for doing good work is getting assigned extra work? That's not going to go over in most organizations, but that locally adapted practice works in that particular environment. And then I would finally say, clearly related to number 2, but I'll call it out separately, is a high degree of staff commitment. But I think it's really important to understand that this is as an effect of the other factors, not as a cause. And I wrote a column several years ago called Cargo Cult Software Engineering, where I talked about the fact that some organizations will look at the very high level of commitment in some of these organizations and think that is the success factor, and they will confuse the cause and effect. And so the takeaway from that will be, if we require our staffs to work tons of overtime, we'll be successful. That's basically, literally putting the cart before the horse, or trying to push on a string, because they're really trying to push on the symptom rather than the cause. The cause is all this other stuff: getting alignment, hiring top talent, getting a high degree of buy-in, making people feel like they're highly supported, part of something special. And then the effect will be the high degree of staff commitment, but that is certainly not the place that we start. So that, I guess, concludes my planned remarks, and I'm definitely open to comments and questions and alternative theories and so on. Yeah.